This happened to me about 3 years ago. I've been driving a tow truck for Morrison's Auto Recovery out of Bellingham, Washington, for a little over 8 years now. Most of our calls take us through northern Washington, logging roads, long stretches of backcountry highways, and sometimes into the outer reaches of the Maple Ridge National Forest. If you've never been up there, Maple Ridge sits right up against the Canadian border, about an hour northeast of the Cascades. It's gorgeous during the day. Massive old pines, fog rising out of valleys, streams cutting through mossy hillsides. But at night, that place turns into something else entirely. The roads snake through miles of dense forest with no guardrails, no streetlights, and no cell service. Most people who work nights in that area have stories. Strange lights, figures crossing the road, weird animal noises that don't sound like anything you can name. I used to laugh at those stories. Until the night I stopped laughing. It was a Tuesday morning, just after 2:30 a.m. Dispatch radioed in, vehicle off the road, possible occupant trapped, Route 47 near mile marker 22. I knew that stretch. It's one of those narrow, twisting forest roads that log trucks and night haulers use to cut around the way stations. Nothing out there but trees and fog. I grabbed my thermos of coffee and hit the road. The air was cold enough that the fog hugged the ground in thick white sheets, reflecting my headlights in strange ways. You learn to take your time on nights like that. Drive slow, keep your eyes open. About 15 minutes later, I hit the mile marker and started scanning the tree line for anything reflective. Usually you'll see a bit of chrome or taillight glass glinting back at you. Sure enough, maybe a quarter mile past the marker, I caught the faintest glimmer off to my right, about 30 feet into the trees. I pulled over, flipped on my flashers, and stepped out. I walked into the trees, following the light. There it was, a blue Honda Accord, nose pointed toward a patch of underbrush, engine off but headlights still on, casting weak beams into the fog. From a distance, it looked like someone had just pulled off to take a nap, but as I got closer, I realized the driver was still inside. She was a young woman, mid-20s maybe. Blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, pale face streaked with tears. She was gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles looked white even through the glass. I tapped on the window and said, "Ma'am, I'm with Morrison's Towing. Are you hurt?" She didn't answer at first. Just looked at me wide-eyed, then pointed toward the woods behind her car. Her mouth moved, but I couldn't hear her through the glass. I told her to roll the window down so we could talk, and she lowered it about an inch, just enough to whisper. "You need to get my car out of here," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, just pull it out. Don't get out of your truck. Don't go behind me. Just get it back to the road." Now, I've seen people in all kinds of states out there, drunk, high, concussed, but there was something different about her. Her eyes weren't wild, just tired. She looked like someone who had been scared for hours. I asked if she was hurt or if someone had tried to attack her. She shook her head. "No, it's still out there." "What's still out there?" I asked. Her eyes flicked toward the trees. "I don't know what it is, but it's big. It's been circling me since midnight. Every time I thought it was gone, it came back." I looked where she was pointing. All I saw was fog, trees, and darkness. Nothing moved. I told her I'd take a quick look around, hook her car up, and get her out of there. But she grabbed the wheel tighter. "Don't go behind the car, please." Something in the way she said that, flat, pleading, absolutely certain, stopped me. I decided to humor her. I walked a slow circle around the car, shining my flashlight on the body panels. That's when I saw it. On the roof, two massive impressions deep enough to catch the beam of my light. Not dense like from a branch falling. These were handprints, huge ones, palms pressed into the metal so hard it had warped inward. Each print had long, deep grooves where fingers or claws had raked backward. I froze. I've pulled cars that hit moose, elk, even a black bear once. I've seen twisted metal from all sorts of accidents, but I had never seen impressions like that. Perfectly shaped, symmetrical, and clearly hands. "Now you see why I wouldn't get out," the woman said from inside. The smell hit next. A thick, wet, musky stench. It was strong enough to make me breathe through my mouth. That's when I heard it. A crack deep in the trees. Not a twig snapping, a branch breaking like something heavy had stepped on it. Then another, from the other side. I turned my light toward the sound, but the beam only reached so far before fog swallowed it whole. The forest felt alive, watching. "Sir," she whispered, "it's doing that thing again." "What thing?" "The knocking. It hits the trees. It's how it scares me." I was about to say I didn't hear anything when something slammed into a tree trunk out in the dark. A solid thunk that echoed. Then another, and another from a different direction. It wasn't random. The sounds moved around us in a slow, deliberate circle. I kept working, trying to keep my hands steady as I attached the chains to the Honda's frame. My flashlight flickered once, then again, then died completely. Perfect timing, the forest went dead quiet again. "Battery died," I muttered, more to myself than her. "I'm grabbing another from the truck." "Stay inside. Don't leave me," she whispered. I wanted to tell her it was fine, but the truth was I didn't believe that. Still, I forced myself to walk back to my truck, moving slow. Every few steps I'd hear soft rustling, footsteps maybe. That stopped when I stopped. The fog had thickened to the point I could barely see my own rig until I was right on top of it. I opened the door, grabbed my backup flashlight, and was just about to turn back when I felt it. A vibration, deep in my chest. Then a low guttural sound rolled out of the forest, a rumble that built into a roar. I've heard bears. I've heard cougars. This was neither. It was lower, rougher, so deep. I thought it was a trick of the fog, just shadows shifting, but no. It was walking. It stepped into the light. The thing was huge. Easily 9 feet tall, maybe more. Broad shoulders covered in thick, dark hair that looked wet and matted. Its arms hung long, swinging just above its knees. The face, it wasn't animal, but it wasn't human either. The eyes caught the headlights and glowed yellow-green. It stopped about 30 feet away, staring straight at me. My body just locked up. I couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe. Then the woman screamed from inside her car. "Go, just go!" I jumped into my truck, started it, and dropped it into gear. The tow chains tightened with a jolt as the Honda lurched behind me. I thought the noise and lights might scare the thing off. I was wrong. It charged. In 2 steps, it was out of the trees and in the road, closing the distance faster than something that big should move. I hit the gas, trying to pull forward, but the Honda's weight slowed me down. The creature reached my door. For a split second, I looked right into its face, close enough to see steam from its breath fog my window. Its hand, if you can call it that, slammed against the door with a hollow metallic groan. Each finger was nearly as wide as my palm. The claws scraped against the glass with a sound that made my stomach twist. We locked eyes. There was no rage in them, just awareness, like it was trying to decide what I was. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it stepped back. I floored it. The truck lurched forward. It didn't chase us. It didn't vanish. It just watched. 8 miles later, we hit the first gas station, a lonely 24-hour place called Cutter's Stop. I pulled under the canopy and finally exhaled. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the truck into park. The woman was crying softly in her car, the kind of exhausted crying people do when the adrenaline wears off. When I stepped out, I walked around to check the damage, and that's when I saw it. Pressed into my driver's door was a massive handprint deep enough to warp the steel. The same as on her car. Long, clawed fingers, distinct palm. The woman walked over, eyes wide. "Those weren't there before." "No," I said quietly. "They weren't." We stood there under the humming lights, just staring at that print. Both of us knew what it meant. We called the sheriff's office, but by the time deputies arrived, the fog had rolled back in. They took photos, asked questions, and promised to send someone to check the area. They never found anything. A week later, a ranger told me that stretch of Route 47 had been closed off temporarily for tree fall cleanup. But when I asked around, no one had seen any fallen trees. I got the door on my truck replaced a month later. I still work nights, but I don't stop along Route 47 anymore. So, this happened back when I was 16. It was the summer my whole life changed, though not in the way you'd think. My mom had taken off years earlier, and my dad wasn't in the picture, so I ended up moving in with my grandparents. They lived way out on the edge of Yellowstone National Park, in this old ranch house that used to belong to one of the original park rangers. The nearest town was almost 2 hours away, and the road out there wasn't even paved, just a long, dusty gravel stretch that disappeared into the trees. It wasn't the kind of place most people would call home. But back then I didn't really have a choice. My grandparents were quiet, hard-working people. My grandfather, a tough, sunburned man who still wore his ranger hat even though he'd retired years ago, spent his days checking fence lines, clearing brush or fixing up old park cabins that hadn't seen visitors in decades. My grandmother handled everything else, cooking, cleaning, keeping the place from falling apart. They didn't ask much of me, except for one thing, one rule that at first didn't seem like a big deal. They told me mighty never to go near the old shed that sat about 50 yards from the back porch, right near the tree line where the pines started getting thick. It was this rusted metal thing, covered in moss and leaning slightly to one side, like it was ready to give up and sink into the ground. The door was secured with a heavy padlock and there were no windows. I remember asking my grandfather what was inside and he just said, "Old equipment. It's not safe. Stay away." But the way he said it, it wasn't casual, something he didn't want me knowing. That summer was brutally hot. Yellowstone was bone dry, no rain, the grass brittle under your boots and this constant smell of hot pine sap in the air. I spent my days doing small chores, wandering around the property, or just sitting under the porch with a glass of cold tea watching the wind ripple through the grass. But as the days dragged on, I started noticing something off about my grandfather. He'd started staying up later. Sometimes I'd wake up around 3 in the morning, look out the window and see the living room light still on. Other times I'd find him sitting out on the back porch with his shotgun propped against the railing, just staring toward the woods. When I asked him about it, he'd just say something like, "Keeping an eye out." And that was it. I figured maybe it was coyotes or bears. But then I noticed he'd started walking out near that shed after dark, flashlight in hand, moving real slow like he was checking on something, and every time I saw him do that, a chill ran down my spine. Then one night, he didn't come back inside. I remember checking the clock. It was close to midnight and I could see the porch light still on, but no sign of him. I told myself he was probably out checking the fence again, or maybe he'd gone down the service road to look at the generator. But when I woke up the next morning, he still wasn't home. I asked my grandmother about it and she didn't seem concerned at all. She just said, "He's probably out at the west fence line. He does that sometimes." That didn't really make me feel better. Later that morning, I went out to feed the chickens. That's when I noticed something strange. The shed, the one that was always locked, was open. Not just unlocked, but wide open. The padlock was hanging from the latch like someone had popped it off and just left it there. I stood there for a while, staring at it. I knew I wasn't supposed to go near it, but something in me said I needed to look. I walked up slowly, the gravel crunching under my boots. When I reached the doorway, I stopped and peeked inside. The smell hit me first, a mix of oil, old gasoline, and rotting wood. My eyes took a second to adjust to the dark, but when they did, I saw that the place wasn't full of tools like I expected. There was a long wooden workbench on one side, a few rusted cans, some rope, and a metal table in the center of the room, and on that table was a Maynard. He was lying flat, wrists and ankles tied down with thick rope. His clothes were filthy, his face swollen and bruised like he'd been beaten badly. His chest was rising and falling just barely. He was alive but unconscious. I froze. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. For a second I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, but no, he was real. The sound of his breathing, shallow and ragged, filled the air. That's when my brain started to catch up. What the hell was I looking at? Why was there a man tied up in my grandfather's shed? I took a step back, careful not to make noise, then another. I turned, shut the door quietly, and walked back toward the house. I didn't run. I didn't scream, I just acted normal. When I got back to the kitchen, my grandmother was humming softly while cutting vegetables. She looked up, smiled, and asked if I wanted breakfast. I could barely nod. A few hours later, I heard the front door open. My grandfather walked in like nothing had happened. His boots were muddy, his face flushed from the heat, but otherwise he looked the same. He nodded at me, said, "Morning," and went to wash up. That's when I noticed the cut on his hand, a deep one across his knuckles, dried blood still caked around it. I remember staring at it, my mouth dry. He caught me looking and said, "Barbed wire." Got careless. Then he smiled, this tight forced smile, and went into the bathroom. That night I couldn't sleep. I saw that man's face, the bruises, the rope burns, the way his chest barely moved. I wanted to believe my grandfather had found a trespasser or a thief and tied him up until help came. But deep down, I knew it didn't feel right. The next morning I went out again. I don't even know why. Maybe I wanted to see if the man was still there. But when I got to the shed, the door was closed and the padlock was back in place, like nothing had ever happened. A few days later, I was sitting in the living room when the old radio crackled to life. The local station was running a news update. The announcer said something about a man who'd been caught breaking into cabins near the west side of Yellowstone, about 20 miles from where we lived. He'd apparently been on the run for weeks, hiding out in the park and stealing supplies. As soon as that part came on, my grandfather reached over and turned the radio down. He didn't say anything, just sat there staring out the window. After that, things went back to normal. He stopped going out late, stopped sitting on the porch with his gun. My grandmother went on as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't unsee what I saw in that shed. 2 weeks later, I packed my things. I didn't tell anyone. I waited until the middle of the night, threw some clothes and money into a duffel bag, and slipped out the back door. I cut through the pine trees, crossed the dirt road, and followed it all the way to the main highway. At dawn, I hitched a ride with a truck driver heading south. I never called them again. Never went back. For a while, I tried to convince myself that maybe the man in the shed had been that burglar they talked about on the radio. Maybe my grandfather caught him breaking in and held him there until the authorities came. But if that were true, why did no one ever show up? Why didn't he tell anyone? And why did he look so calm afterward, like it was just another day? Years went by and I built a new life far away from Wyoming. But every now and then I'll see a missing persons poster, a hiker gone without a trace, a camper who never came back, and it all comes flooding back. My best friend Connor and I had always been outdoors guys. We grew up hiking the Rockies, camping on weekends, doing all the stuff that made us feel like we were escaping real life for a while. But this trip, the one I'm about to tell you about, was different. It was supposed to be just another camping trip, but it still haunts me to this day. We decided to go camping in Glacier National Park, up in northern Montana. If you've ever been there, you know just how vast and wild it is. Towering pine trees, steep ridgelines, lakes so clear they look fake, but also these massive stretches of land where you can go hours without seeing another soul. We'd both had a rough few months, work stress, breakups, the usual life stuff, and thought a few nights off-grid would clear our heads. Connor was the one who picked the spot. He found it on a forum where hikers shared secret locations of those unofficial clearings that weren't marked on park maps, but people sometimes used for backcountry camping. He said it was supposed to be near a small creek that fed into Lake McDonald, about a 3-hour hike from the nearest trailhead. We left early that morning, parked at the empty lot, checked in with the ranger station, and started hiking. The air was cool and quiet. By early afternoon, we found the spot. And I'll be honest, it was perfect. A wide clearing just off a small creek, surrounded by massive pines and thick brush. You could hear the water running faintly, and the ground was flat enough to pitch 2 tents side by side. We set up camp, gathered wood, and made some coffee on my portable stove. Everything felt peaceful, until around 4 p.m., when Connor suggested hiking up the ridge behind the clearing to get a better view before sunset. We didn't plan to go far, just up and back before dark. We left our tents, the firewood, everything. I remember glancing back at our little setup as we walked away. 2 tents, 2 chairs, and a cooler. No one else around. We were gone maybe an hour. The ridge wasn't that high, but the view was incredible. An ocean of trees, snow-capped peaks in the distance, and nothing man-made in sight. We started heading back as the light began to fade, but when we got back to camp, something was different. I didn't notice it. I was halfway through complaining about how tired my legs were when Connor just stopped walking. He was staring past me. "Dude," he said quietly. "What?" He pointed. And that's when I saw it. Another tent. It was sitting maybe 30 yards from ours, same general size and shape, but older, weathered, like it had been through a few storms. The fabric was a faded tan color, not one of those bright modern ones. It looked out of place. I actually laughed at first, thinking maybe someone had followed our path and set up nearby. But Connor didn't laugh. He said, "There was no one here when we came in." He was right. We hadn't seen anyone, no hikers, no other campers, not even footprints. We stood there for a while, waiting for someone to step out, maybe say hi, but nothing happened. The tent just sat there, completely still. After a minute, Connor said, "You think they came while we were up there?" "Maybe," I said, though I didn't believe it. I didn't hear anyone. Didn't smell smoke. Didn't see movement. We called out, "Hello? Anybody there?" A few times, no answer. I walked a little closer, maybe 10 or 15 feet away. The tent flap was closed. I couldn't see inside, but there was something about it that felt wrong. Like it hadn't just been set up, and like it had been there waiting. The ground around it was undisturbed. No footprints, no gear. Just that single tent sitting in the middle of the clearing like it had appeared out of nowhere. "Let's just move," Connor said finally. "Find another spot." I didn't argue. We packed up fast, faster than we probably should have, and hiked deeper into the trees until we found another flat patch near a line of rocks. It was darker now, and I remember that feeling of the forest closing in. That night neither of us said much. The fire cracked softly, and every now and then I'd hear something moving in the brush. Not close, but far enough to keep me on edge. Connor must have felt it too. At one point around midnight, I heard what sounded like fabric flapping in the distance, and like a tent being shaken by the wind. The next morning, Connor looked like he hadn't slept at all. He said he heard footsteps sometime around 2 a.m. circling the camp, slow, deliberate steps. When he shined his flashlight, they stopped, then started again a few minutes later. I didn't hear them, but the look on his face told me he wasn't joking. We spent another night there before deciding to pack up and head out. We were both ready to be done, but on the way back to the trailhead we had to pass by the original clearing, the one where we first set up. Neither of us said anything as we got close. We just kind of slowed down, both watching the trees ahead, and then we saw it. The tent, that strange tan tent, was still there. But it wasn't standing anymore. It was ripped apart. The fabric was shredded like something had clawed through it. Long, uneven slashes tore from top to bottom, and the poles were bent inward like they'd been crushed. We stood there, frozen. The clearing was dead quiet. I walked up close enough to see inside. There was nothing. No sleeping bag, no clothes, no food. Just dirt and torn canvas. The weirdest part was there was no blood, no drag marks. It was like the tent had been attacked by something that didn't actually exist. Connor whispered, "What the hell could have done that?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. We left it alone and hiked the rest of the way back to the trailhead without stopping once. When we finally got to the parking lot, ours was the only car in there. I remember checking my phone, a no service, of course, and Connor saying, "We should tell the Rangers." So we did. We went straight to the ranger station and explained everything. The strange tent, the shredded fabric, the fact that there were no signs of people. The ranger we talked to was this older guy. He didn't look surprised, just kind of nodded. He asked us to show him on the map where it was, and then he said they'd send a team out to check it. A few days later, he called me back. He said, "We found the site," but then he paused. There was nothing there. According to him, when the Rangers got there, the clearing was empty. No tent, nothing, just flattened grass where it had been. He said they'd looked for signs of wildlife, but found nothing. No animal scat, not even boot tracks. When I told Connor, he just stared at me for a long time, then said, "Let's never go back there." And we didn't, because the part that really gets me, the part I can't explain, was this. When the Rangers went out there, they said there were 2 clear sets of footprints leaving the area. They followed them for about half a mile before they suddenly stopped. No broken branches, no disturbed soil, no sign of where they went. 2 sets, leading away from the shredded tent. But Connor and I hadn't gone back there. We were miles away by then. So who, or what, left them? I still don't have an answer.